Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and everything in between. Welcome back to Old Man Rambles. Today's going to be a bit of a stroll down memory lane. Um, Late 90s, early 2000s, there was an explosion of online webcomics. Those old farts like me, you've got Bob the Angry Flower, um, Girls with Slingshots, Strong Female Protagonist, Sinfest, Girl Genius, Something Positive, Penny Arcade, Oglaf, if I haven't mentioned that one yet. But and of course, PvP Online was the name of the comic, which is what I'm going to be talking about. Again, late 90s, early 2000s, explosion of webcomics, partly because that was around the time that casual artists realized that they had a platform they could use. That's why there was an explosion around that time of webcomics, because instead of trying to get into the newspapers like they used to, they could just set up a website and start putting out the comic books they've been drawing on, for their own entertainment or trying to get into the business. They just put them out for themselves and whatever. And some of them were wildly popular, and some of them still are. And one of the ones that I read very consistently was PvP Online. I was a huge fan of it. I have merch. I don't know if anyone ever noticed this Stein sit in the back. I bought their merch. I liked them that much. I bought a bunch of Steins. I bought some shirts. The comic was created by a guy named Scott Kurtz. He had a couple comic books before. I think he had a comic book called Ding, which was about a comic about the MMORPG EverQuest. PvP Online was about a fictional gaming review magazine. And, the staff, you had, the owner and editor, the game reviewers and writers, the IT guy, all various different personalities. And it was basically a comic book for nerds. A comic strip for nerds of all stripes, There were, of course, a bunch of gamers, but gamers of different types. Some of them played, RPGs. Some of them played sports games. Some first-person shooters. They all played Dungeons and Dragons. There was all kinds of, and the two older gentlemen of the series were high school buddies who got into the company by themselves, who started the company on their own, and they loved Star Trek. They played D&D. They had Star Wars. All these nerd references came up. And like I said, I read this thing religiously. Anytime he updated, I was right there reading. And I followed it for years. But not just the comic strip. There was a forum, a chat forum. Most websites have chat forums still today. It's not that uncommon to have a dedicated website to have a forum for discussions. PvP's forums wasn't really about the comic book. It was still early in the online community, late 90s, early 2000s. And it was just a place for nerds to hang out and talk. And I've mentioned quite often that I grew up in a small town of Maine, in mid-coast Maine, where there weren't a lot of people to share my interests with. There were a handful of people who liked the same things that I did, but only a handful that I knew of that I could, talk about. The books I read, the comics I liked, the movies I liked, things of that nature. There weren't a lot of people to nerd out with. And I'd been on online communities before, but usually I was there for a specific purpose. I had an interest. I found a website which had a forum. I would get into discussions about that specific purpose. And then once I was done with that content, I would just drift away and not go back anymore. But the PvP forums was different. It was full of people like me. A few of them were my age. A lot of them were younger, but there were a handful of guys my age with the same kind of, holy crap, this is my people. and it became my online community for years. I got to know these people quite well. Some of them, I've only met one of them in the flesh. I have kept in contact with 7 or 8 of them on social media because I liked them that much. You know, I knew their web handles better than I knew their real names. You know, Templar, Mr. Opus, Raja Salaryman, Tika, Breathe, Sajida, India Inc., dozens of others. we talked. I mean, we talked about our lives, talked about our hobbies. We had role playing discussions where they were storytelling, where someone would post like a writing prompt, and then someone else would respond to it, and another person. These things went on for days, and told these massive, complicated stories that I also took part in. You know, they had get-togethers. Some of them dated. Some of them had messy breakups. Some of them got married. Some of them became writers, and some of them have since passed away. But this was the first time I'd found a community of my people. Really found a place where I really belonged. You know, there wasn't a single person there that wasn't like me in some way. And I was a part of this community for a very long time. I did eventually drift away because a lot of people that I knew drifted away. Different forms of social media became our means of contact. Things like LiveJournal and MySpace and Facebook and Tumblr and Twitter, which I never joined, but you know, we did kind of drift apart. But I did still go back there from time to time. Sometimes weeks, sometimes months would go by. But I do still go back there quite a bit. Like I said, not as daily like I used to, but I probably visit the website just to make sure I'm up to date on stuff. Probably 2 or 3 days a week. I'll just pop on and just to see if there's anything new, any new conversations. Couple caveats though. The PvP forums no longer belongs to PvP Online. It broke off into something of its own. Someone played a joke, and Scott Kurtz, the creator of the website and the forums, took it very badly. I think it's 50-50. I think maybe the joke might have gone a bit too far. I'm not saying bought, but they registered the forum name themselves. They had no intention of keeping it. They were going to register the actual forum name and then give it to Scott Kurtz. He blew up quite a lot. And the forums split off, created a separate name, said, okay, here's your forum name back. We're going to create our own forum. There were other things too, though. One of the reasons I stopped reading PvP Online a little bit was Scott wasn't updating as well. I didn't really but I didn't like the way the storylines were progressing as much, so I kind of drifted away. Scott Kurtz also burned a bunch of bridges. He behaved very badly at some conventions. So there's a pattern of behavior of him behaving badly. So people drifted away. People I knew and liked drifted away. We went to other social media sites. Scott Kurtz was kind of a dick sometimes. I would still go back and check the webcomic every once in a while. He went from updating 5 days a week to 3 days a week, which makes a lot of sense. It's hard to draw a new comic 5 days a week. That didn't drive me away, but he stopped the main storyline to concentrate on other things. And then he started putting things behind a paywall, which a lot of comic creators did. And for me, it's like, I'm not going to pay for these things. I'll buy your merch. But putting something behind a paywall that I had been getting for free for years kind of You know, he would put a couple out for free and then put like important story pieces behind the paywall. That just frustrated me. Um, but like I said, I still went back to the forums to check up on people. Some of the people that I remember are still there, even though I'm, you know, on social media, and I see the ones that I'm close to, I see on social media and talk to them from time to time. But a couple days ago, someone put a post on that said Scott Kurtz has pulled the plug on PvP. Um, he hasn't updated the comic book in a couple of years, so hardly surprising, but he's officially pulled the plug. He's taken everything offline. Um, he's going to basically make them for sale as PDFs you can download. He's like going to compile all of his years and years of comics, make them purchasable as a PDF. He had a Kickstarter. He was going to put them out in a book format, which he never delivered on, which has aggravated a lot of people. That's money down the tubes. I didn't do that, but a lot of people are aggravated him for blowing their money down the tubes. But I mean, his official post that he's moving on to other things. He's going to start writing books for children. But, you know, he's burned a lot of bridges, like I said. So a lot of people who were longtime fans have just kind of given up on him. But I have mixed feelings. Like I said, I haven't followed PvP for years. And my presence in the forums is intermittent. But I find myself being nostalgic and regretting the loss of something that once meant so much to me, because it was my first real online community. To date, it is still the longest running online community I've been a part of, even more than stuff like Facebook. Because, I mean, I grew, you know, disillusioned with Facebook long ago. These days I really only post on it. I post a meme once a day, and I'll do a few little doom scrolling. I try and keep it to a minimum so I don't waste my time on it. But you know, my little community on Facebook is mostly my family, and the only reason I keep my presence on Facebook is to keep in touch with people that's my only point of contact. But the PvP forums was a strong presence in my life for several years, beginning in the mid-90s and stretching into the early 2000s. Probably good 5 or 6 years, I was there every day, you know, multiple times a day, more than I should have been, and when I should have been doing something else. I don't work there anymore, so I can't get in trouble for goofing off there. But there were a lot of good people there, and I miss that sense of camaraderie that I used to have when I was there. It's something I have rarely felt. And it's weird to have that kind of camaraderie with people you never meet face to face, people I've never met face to face. The only person I met from that forums in the flesh was someone who actually lived in the same state that I was in, but who went in the hospital. And like, I was the only person in the state. It's like, okay, he's going to the hospital. I should at least, you know, I'm part of the community. I'm the only person from the community who could physically go to see him. So I kind of went as the forum representative. You know, I brought him a get well card, you know, got him a souvenir, said, hey, this is kind of a get well card from the guys at PvP, you know, from the crew on the forums. But, you know, it's something that I haven't paid attention much in years, but I'm still, at the same time, sad to see it go. Good hunting.